Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mind, Body, and Roots. Today I have a dental school classmate, practice owner, and just a really, really awesome and smart guy to talk to. His name is Chay, and he's from Thailand originally, but he grew up here, and he just has such a cool story. And I just want him to take a moment to talk about himself, describe what he's been up to since graduation, and with all further ado, Chay, the stage is yours.
How you doing, Ahad?
I'm good, man.
Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. Looking forward to having a pretty good conversation with you, like we always do. Yeah, so how do you want to start this? Where do you want me to kind of begin?
So tell us about what you've been up to. Well, actually, let's start with college. Kind of like tell me what was your undergrad like, and then how you got to NYU, and then what you're up to now.
Gotcha. So, interesting. 10 years ago, actually, graduated from
Mm-hmm.
college, right? So
Yeah.
2016, basically grew up in Jersey, went to Rutgers, New Brunswick for my undergraduate, and then, actually want to talk about a little bit about my undergraduate kind of journey because it plays kind of a big role in, I think, who I am today and kind of how I got to where I am now. Interestingly enough, I've always wanted to be a dentist, right? So I've pretty much known since I was like maybe 12 or 13 years old that, hey, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And I'll go into more of that later on. It kind of ties into how I came about my practice. But yeah, undergrad for me wasn't the best, right? And, at that age, a lot of lessons to be learned, didn't take school as seriously. And throughout the whole time, one of my battles that I had to fight with myself throughout undergrad was, is this what I really want to do? Do I want to get to dental school? Right? My focus wasn't really there. Tried to have more fun, right? Socialized more than prioritizing school, which kind of set me back a bit. So, finishing undergrad, I didn't feel fully confident that, like, hey, I could go to dental school and I could do this. Still wanted to do it, loved it. Throughout college, I was assisting my dentist at the time, worked for her part time, and my mind was always wanting to do it, but then the temptations of being a young college kid, right? Having fun, hanging out with your friends kind of veered me off a little bit. So struggled a little bit with those classes, didn't do great, and kind of had to make a comeback. And that's kind of where it led me to, instead of applying for dental school right away, because I knew I wasn't ready. My grades weren't ready. My mentally, I wasn't ready. I don't think I was mature enough at the time. So I ended up going to grad school. So I did, like one of those 2 year oral bio programs that are like connected with the dental school at Rutgers. Newark is where I did mine. And that's kind of where I was able to grow, kind of figure out who I was. Like, am I capable of doing this? Prepare my foundation, strengthen myself before I apply. And then from there, I kind of found my groove, right? As you mature, you get older, you take things more seriously. And then I realized, like, hey, I really do have this in me, right? Like, I could do this. My past mistakes were just from not putting in enough effort, right? And now that I've proven that to myself, that's where I applied for school, um, got into NYU, and never looked back. There was actually an interesting point in my grad program where I was deciding between, do I go to dental school or do I stay for a PhD? Because the lab I was with at the time, I was doing some cool work. We were doing a great project that was pretty novel, and not many people were doing that technique. So my supervisor was like, "Hey, like, why don't you stay around for a little bit or try to get, to some kind of PhD program?" So I had to make a decision that year too, where do I want to stay in academia? I love doing the research, I love the projects, or do I want to, kind of go straight into dentistry? So my path to dentistry wasn't your classic 4 years, right? 4 years of undergrad, go right to dental school, come out of it, and then that's it. I had my failures in undergrad, classes I didn't make it through that I had to, take back again. So it wasn't a straightforward path. But then now that I look back, I wouldn't change anything about it. Seeing where I've come. I mean, this is the best choice I could have made. But it took me a little bit longer than your conventional route. But we got there, right?
Yeah. And like you say that, and I feel like that's actually probably the most important thing because I had a similar journey too, man. Like I graduated with a health policy administration degree from Penn State. I want to be an administrator, eventual CEO of hospitals. My dad's like, hey, I'm all for your goals and dreams, but I'm going to tell you right now, no doctor is going to respect you, like at all. And I've run into that myself as like a doctor now, like a practice. I'm like, yeah, I hate these practice managers and all this. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I totally understand it. But like, I worked in a lab. I was a practice manager myself. Like, I did all like the little nitty gritty things, assisting, and I'm very grateful that I spent about 2 years doing that. And there was a time where I applied for that my first time during my second year, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get in. I only had like 3 interviews. Got into NYU much later than most people, but I got in.
Me too. Me too.
But I was so grateful because I was actually accepted into the Boston Oral Health Program, like the OHS, similar to how you were
That's so
Rutgers.
similar to my, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I basically was just about to pay my deposit, and like a week later, or a week before I did, I got the acceptance, and I just said, "Hey, thank you for keeping my spot, but I actually got accepted into NYU," and so I decided to go there, and I just didn't look back, and man, now we are here, and it's just like, dang, I actually was able to do it. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, I saw an interesting Instagram post maybe like a week or two ago. It's like a little dental meme, where at one point in our lives we were praying for this, right? Every night praying for this. And then now we wake up, we're like, oh, here's another day, right? We're going in, we're doing it. So it's always cool to look back. And I'm a very self-reflective person. So I kind of always think back to kind of like where we started, where we came from. I mean, even day to day, the dental profession is just a profession of growth. You're a better clinician than you were the day before. Always, if you're really putting yourself out there, you make improvements every day. And when you look back, you're like, man, like can't believe where I was, at one point. And for me, especially being that I took over the practice that I grew up going to, that kind of resonates with me on a daily basis when I walk in, because I remember walking into the same doors when I was, 6, 7 years old, right? The same operatory, right? And it's always like, man, like I was a kid here and I remember dreaming about being able to sit in the dentist chair, right? To grab the handpiece and to run the pedal and to be able to do all this cool stuff. And now I'm doing it. Now I run the place, now it's my practice. So it's quite a special thing.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of cool because like I think you have a pretty unique journey in the fact that like you were an assistant and you worked your way up and you ended up buying the practice that you assisted at, you know? I think
Yeah,
that's cool, man.
yeah. I mean, did I ever expect it to go that way? Couldn't have imagined that in a million years that I'd end up, you know, running this place. Like I mean, it's where my journey started, but obviously dentistry, there's just so many avenues you could take that, it still surprises me. Like, man, like, dude, like I grew up here. I'm gonna probably die here, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Dude, yeah, it's definitely interesting to say the least, but life's kind of cyclical in that way. And I think there's a little bit of a beauty in that, you know?
Yeah, things just come full circle, whether you expect it to or not.
Yeah, but it is what it is. So you did all that. You did the master's. You had a good time at NYU. What happened after you left NYU? What was the game plan then?
Right. So when we were at NYU, my original intention as, like maybe a second year at the time was like I want to specialize. Like I'm kind of thinking of the next step, right? We're getting familiar with the profession, taking all the basics and getting a taste for what dentistry has to offer. And I felt at the time and I find that this trend, of course, comes up all the time in life is there's always a path you have to pick, right? A fork in a road where you got to make a choice and that can affect a lot of things down the way. And at the time when I was in school, I really wanted to be a specialist, right? Like I loved being in academics, loved school. I was very passionate about learning and I loved being challenged, keeping good grades. Like when I studied, I really studied and it was something that I really enjoyed, learning more and more about whatever it is. So I was like, maybe I have what it takes, right, to become a specialized doctor, take it to the next level. Part of me wanted to do pediatrics. Part of me was very interested in perio at the time. Like there's, just so much out there. But then again, there's that other side of, or do I want to go right into practice, right? Do I want to stay as a GP, go into general practice? And that's the end of that second year. The my dentist, the one I worked for as an assistant, she actually, her and her husband reached out to me. So their practice, her husband ran, the insurance. He was the office manager. He ran the front desk kind of thing. She did the dentistry. They had, assistant, hygienist, but they were like that kind of couple, right? Like a power team. So they both reached out to me and was like, "Hey, can we sit down with you? We want to, catch up. Let's have some lunch. We're gonna see how you're doing. We want to kind of, check out what's going on." So I was like, "Oh yeah, we regularly keep in touch, right? We were always keeping up with each other. So we sit down and they come and visit me in the city. We have a nice lunch, and they tell me like, hey, look, we want to talk to you about what you want to do going forward with your career because we're looking to slow down, right? So basically, what they were trying to get to was we're at the point in our careers where we're basically trying to retire within the next, you know, 5 years or so. They're pretty much done. They want to get an associate into the office, and they're like, "Hey, if you want it, the offer's there. We'd love to have you join up, become an associate for a year, a couple years, see how it goes, right? If you like the practice, then of course we have that offer up for you to purchase it because they're ready to get out." So that's kind of where I was like, "Whoa," I mean, as a second year in dental school, you don't know anything. You have no idea what the real world is like. You have no idea what you want to do. You have no idea what even how to open a practice, how to run a practice. I mean, we're still babies, right? So when I kind of got to that conversation with them, I was like, whoa, like this is serious. Like like they're actually planning this and they want, I'm kind of like the catalyst for this whole thing to go down. Like, do I want to do this? And then a part of me was like, oh, I want to keep going to school. Like, I might want to, do a specialist program. I don't really want to do GP work. I don't want to go back to Jersey. Maybe I wanted to stay in New York or, practice somewhere else. I didn't know. Right. And it's kind of like you're at that stage where at that point in your very young career, you have no idea what's out there, like what you're capable of, right? What opportunities you could run into. I mean, it's endless with dentistry. So, I was like, look, like, I appreciate this offer, right? I'm gonna really think seriously about it, but I'm gonna need some time too, because it's kind of making me make that choice, right? Where, because at the time I was very focused on you know, academics, getting the schooling right, getting the right grades, because if I want to go into a program, right, that's kind of the route you got to kind of do. And maybe I didn't want to be a practice owner. I don't know. I never knew if I wanted to do that. I didn't know if that's something I had in me to do. So I go home, think about it, and talk to my parents, right? Talk to my significant other, my family, kind of see what they think. And honestly, it was a no-brainer. When I really sat down and thought about it, I mean, to have a guaranteed job straight out of school with such an open opportunity to, take over practice that is dear to my heart that I grew up going to, and also a wonderful practice that is very unique on its own, that you don't really find too many of these kind of practices nowadays, where the practice that she had that I now took over is, I would call it like a boutique practice, right? It's a different style of dentistry that we practice, and it's definitely something special, and I couldn't let that go. And then after talking to my mentor, he like, hey doc, like like part of me wants to do all these crazy things, like I want to do all these awesome surgeries and do cutting edge dentistry and all this crazy work, and or maybe I want to be specialized at treating kids because that's what I really enjoyed at the time. Was pediatrics was awesome to me. I really enjoyed that side of dentistry. And then she goes, well, think about this, right? If you're the practice owner and you're a general dentist, you have a lot of freedom that, we sometimes forget. I think when people think like OGP, it can be very boring, right? Bread and butter dentistry, but in reality, the opportunities are endless, especially if you're starting your own practice, because that's where you could do whatever procedure you want to incorporate what you want to bring into your practice. You have that full freedom. And, she tells me, hey, you want to treat kids? You can do that in your practice. There's nothing telling you can't be a great pediatric dentist as a general dentist. So so she kind of made like a very good point there where as a GP, we can really do what you want to do in your profession, right? You kind of have that ability to pick. Like, all right, I love doing aesthetics, right? I love doing implants. You could do implants. You know, if you want to do surgery as a GP, you can do surgery. So there's, and that's where it kind of was like, it kind of clicked for me, like, okay, she's not wrong, right? I mean, it's as a GP, you have that freedom, whereas as a specialist, while you're more cutting edge and you're doing like, you know, the complex, crazy cases, right? You're kind of locked into that one specialty. Whereas and especially now today, looking back, like I've come to appreciate the power of being a GP, you know, especially a GP that strives to be proficient, comprehensive, you know, have a good grasp on every, you know, procedure, specialty that you can kind of handle, you know, to a degree. And I find that that is such a valuable thing for, especially for me as like a solo doc, you know, I want to offer as much as I can, obviously, to my patients. But yeah, I think I'm getting off on a tangent here, so we might have to try to veer back on track there. Sorry about that.
No, man. That's the whole point. Is dude, you're telling me like all about you, and that's is part of your craft, man. Like keep on going. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, to go back to that decision, you know, of coming into work here. I mean, pretty much like 2 weeks after that conversation, I was like, oh, not gonna, you know, pursue anything else. Graduate school, you know, get myself ready, get as skilled as I can to go into private practice right away. I actually decided to skip the residency as well. So I did not do a residency, you know, right after dental school, went right into practice like pretty much that summer, you know, graduated, and they were the practice that I went into, they were so ready to have me in that like the minute that, you know, I was licensed and ready to go. I mean, we had a schedule set, and I you know, I kind of jumped right into the deep end there, which that's another conversation in itself too that I'm happy to go into, you know, if you want me to.
Now is this practice? It's in Jersey, I'm assuming, because in New York you need a GPR.
Yeah, yeah, it is in Jersey, so that's why there's no GPR requirement. And then again, that choice, you know, the fork in the road, where do I do a GPR or do I go right into work, right? And my mentor was, you know, very present throughout this whole process. Obviously, you know, I would talk to her like, hey, like, so what about, you know, me doing a residency? Like, do you think I should do one before I, you know, join up in your practice? Like, you know, because we had our challenges in dental school, right? We went to dental school during a time where COVID was a big thing. We lost a lot of time, and you know, there were modifications to the dental school experience, you know, the education, you know, to accommodate for that. So, you know, I feel like we weren't given, of course, the full right educational experience that maybe previous classes had, but before COVID, where we were limited with clinic time, right? We had a lot of things go online. Things became, you know, that's kind of the age of shifting, right? Things became more Zoom, you know, and that kind of stuff, and digital, right? Virtual stuff, simulations. I feel like that also kind of gave me a concern, like, hey, you know, like if I go off into real practice, like, can I do this? You know, because you graduate knowing what you have to know, right? And you can do the all the basics, but to go into real world like private practice, you know, where the stakes are the highest, and you're a brand new fresh doc straight out of dental school, that's a little concerning. You know, that could be a little bit of a challenge you have to fight through because, you know, without a residency, then you're kind of your confidence isn't fully there when you start, right? And I find that building confidence as a young doctor is everything when you're starting out. It keeps you up at night, right? It makes you feel like the best doctor, and it also keeps you up. Keeps you on your toes. And I think building confidence was, you know, it's not easy. It's not easy, and especially in today where I find that as a GP, we're responsible for so many more things today than previous generations of general dentists, right? Like the scope and the grasp of the profession has just grown so much that you know, you have to know so many different procedures, so many different things. You have to be well versed in a ton of stuff to be a GP. So I was like, man, like, do I do a residency? Do I skip it? Like, am I going to even be ready? You know, luckily, my mentor there, she said, hey, look, like, you know, just come work. She's going to guide me. Right? More than happy take me through the ropes, the initial, like the growing pains. To me, that was like, hey, it's like basically a one-on-one residency, right? I get to begin my journey very early in private practice because private practice is also different from hospital dentistry. And that in itself has, a bunch of its own quirks and things you gotta, become savvy at to succeed. So being able to start that early, I was like, well, you know what? And if she was a solo practitioner, she was able to do everything. So she had the skill sets that, I wanted to attain, right? And if I was going to eventually take over her practice, I had to be able to provide the same services that she did, to a degree. And so I figured, all right, then we'll skip the residency. I think I'm just going to go right to you. If you're willing to, spend the time with me and get me, ready and prepared to go out on my own and eventually run this thing. And with my option to purchase, I mean, I'm all aboard, right? I'm pretty much all aboard. So yeah, from that moment on, kind of just knew, like before I even finished dental school, that this I was going to end up in this practice. Already started making plans for going into work, and then the plan was purchasing within like 2 or 3 years, after I graduate, which ended up happening. So yeah, graduate dental school. Within that summer, I was an associate there, and that was 2022. Then yeah, by the beginning of 24, I purchased from them and completely took over. Happened pretty quick too. So I was really only an associate there for like, a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years. Enough time to see the practice for what it was and to get to know the patients, to get to know, how it runs. And I think that in itself was huge in my transition taking over from her, because it wasn't, new guy walks in, takes the keys. Hey, how you doing? Right, I'm the new doc. I've seen people for, a longer span, enough, visits that they know who I am. It was a very straightforward transition, honestly. And looking back, like that was one of my, biggest concerns going forward with taking the practices. She was a fantastic dentist, right? She was great at everything. The patients loved her. She really built such a unique experience in the office. Am I going to be able to do that? Am I going to be able to provide what she can, and will the patients even stay with me? Because as you know, the heart and soul of a dental office is the dentist, right? It's the dentist, it's the staff, and like, what if I take over and they're like, oh, we don't really like them, right? Or it doesn't work for us. So that was my huge concern too. Is even though I spent some time there, I was like, well, now that it's really time to transition, like, will the people stay with me? And, luckily it worked out to where I'd say pretty much everybody stayed. I'd say 90% of the patients from, the practice stayed on board. And a lot of it from the feedback I hear now is because I did spend the time in the beginning. I was there as an associate. And I was cranking out cleanings. I was doing hygiene, right? I wasn't doing anything crazy. I was doing very basic work, your bread and butter dentistry. But it was that getting to know them and building that comfort that when I transitioned, it was seamless. It was just like, a lot of people say this. They're like, yeah, it's almost like you're the same person, just you're just a younger new version, right? So that's what a lot of patients tell me, is that we don't really feel the difference. It was just so smooth that we're not going anywhere. So I'm very, very lucky and very fortunate. And reflecting back, just a couple weeks ago was the start of my third year running the practice. So it's been, quite a journey to think back. Like my concerns I had at the time, right, are not problems I have anymore. And then there's new problems that always come up, right? But that's kind of what you learn, that's part of the job. It's kind of what you signed up for. Every day is a new problem you got to solve, and that's just the nature of our jobs. But to see the growth in just such a short amount of time, I'm very grateful. Like when my patients, come back in and we're catching up, they're like, yeah, so how's, like, the practice doing? How's everything going? And I'm like, every time I think of the answer, I'm like, all I could say is I'm grateful. I'm grateful everybody gave me a chance. Uh, Grateful that people stuck it through. And there were many points where that first year I opened up, I was like, oh boy, You know, like was this the right move? You know, it's was this is this going to play out the way I wanted to? And even through the second year, felt a lot of the same. You know, growing pains, which I've come to learn now is that's just part of the deal. You know, you kind of got to fight through it, and if you let it push you down, then you're not going to see where the true value really is. And I find that this year is the first year so far for me that I'm like, I'm glad I did this. You know, like this is working out nicely, and I wouldn't change anything. I really wouldn't. But then if you were to ask me a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I would have been like, I don't know, man. Like this is way more than I thought I could handle. You know, so it's pretty cool to always look back to, you know, like I said, see where you're coming from, see where you start, and growth is such a satisfying thing. Like, you know, professional growth, personal growth, whatever it may be. I mean, I've learned so much about myself from this experience so far, and you know, much more to come. But it's taught me a lot that I never thought I'd find out. You know,
Dude, honestly, that's such a killer like journey. Like to like jump into an associate, grow into an owner such early on in your career. That's tough, man. That takes guts and a lot of glory, a lot of, to really want to go after it. But I commend you for that. And especially like being fee for service and being at a network, that's even harder because you're not waiting or basically receiving patients from insurance plans, but you're building a reputation or maintaining a reputation of the practice so that you can continue to provide the excellent level of care. And honestly, man, like I really commend that because that's like one of the hardest things to do, right? It just speaks to how dedicated and detailed of a clinician you are. And I don't say that lightly because coming out so early in your career to do that, that's impressive, man. So like kudos to you. Seriously.
appreciate that, man. Appreciate that. I mean, you know, to go off that point too is, you know, like I was talking about with confidence, right? Like that was tough. It is scary to do it as a young doctor because you know, like 5, 10 years in dentistry is not much. Like every
Mhm.
day you're practicing, you learn that the more you know, the more you really don't know. You know, every single day I feel that. And dentistry is a very, very hard profession. It's so precise. You're dealing with pain and you're dealing with emotions, right? Anxiety. And there's so many challenges to it that I was like, man, like without having residency to back me up or come straight out of school and not knowing how to run a business, you know, at all. The only business experience I had is through my parents. They're restaurant owners, right? So I kind of got an idea on what it's like and what kind of lifestyle it takes to really be a business owner. And it is a lot. You know, it's once you sign up for it, you sign up for it, right? And you're in for the deal where that takes over your life and it's your everything, right? And at that time I was like, man, like, you know, what if I mess up? Like, what if I do this procedure that I think I can do, or and it's complicated and you know it doesn't work out? So that was a fear I always had, honestly, going into, you know, taking over the practice and especially being a solo, you know, doctor. There's no one else in there, you know, if something goes south, I got to send you out, right? And that's where I had to be very cautious and smart with how I approached that first transitional year with my patients, right? Where, you know, in dentistry and in health in general, it doesn't come without risk, no matter what you're doing. You know, even if it's a simple filling, right? There's always risks to any procedure we do, and that's just part of dentistry. And I find that, you know, building a rapport with the patients early on, establishing that trust, and, you know, really proving to your patients that, hey, I'm here to help, right? I'm here to give you the best dentistry I can. But dentistry isn't always black and white. It really isn't, right? You know, you look at an x-ray, this looks straightforward, open up the tooth, and it's entirely what you didn't expect, right? So, and then
Mhm.
we have that all the time, right? That's like a daily occurrence with dentistry. So, you know, I was like, man, like that's scary going into that, like not knowing and not having the full confidence to your patients.
So, Chay, we were talking about more about knowing what you don't know, and you're finishing up your journey on your practice. So, go ahead, continue with that.
I think I was talking about my first year there, you know,
Hmm.
transitioning and going into it without, you know, a residency or some kind of like stronger background, right? Coming fresh out of school and going right into practice. Where, you know, luckily with the transitional phase, my mentor had she taught me pretty much everything I know, right? Like she kind of she really took the time, and even to this day I'm grateful that the way she structured our schedule, it really allowed for me to grow. It gave me time to work with her, kind of see how she did things, and really learn the ropes of private practice, and the level of dentistry that she was providing to her patients to prepare me to take over, right? But then even with all of that, like all throughout, there was always that concern of, can I really do this? Can I make it? And to make it a long story short, what I've come to learn is that you're never going to feel prepared. If you're going to sit there and think like, yeah, I'm ready to take over this practice, it's going to go so smooth, without any issues. I'm going to be able to handle everything that comes in the door. It's just not a realistic uh, expectation to have for yourself and for anybody. I think that no matter where you're at, I think you could do it. Like for me, I was very young, no experience in running a business, very young dentist, still learning the ropes, and and I find that you can figure it out. You just got to give yourself the time. You kind of and you got to be hard on yourself. It's not easy, right? It's not meant to be easy, and you're always going to be challenged, but it's whether how you deal with it, how you yourself approach that challenge is all that matters in succeeding. And I think that if you push yourself hard enough, you'd be surprised, because I certainly surprised myself many times where I'm like, I didn't think I could do this, but hey, I figured it out, So it's been an incredible journey. I mean, I don't want to ramble on, but where I am today, I'm super grateful. It's been an incredible experience, and every day I walk into the office, I look forward to, taking on what the next day has. And now that I'm, a few years through the growing pains, and I'm starting to see, the practice grow. I'm starting to see the rewards come in for all the hard work, right? And now that things are becoming more fluid, the issues are different. I'm not dealing with the same problems. I'm having a lot of fun with dentistry. I think that maybe, I mean, I would attribute a lot of it to the way I practice too, is I give myself that time, right? With the way the office is structured, being fee for service, like I give all my recare patients an hour, and I'm doing the pro fee for them. I'm doing the exam, and to be able to practice this certain way without rushing, and really being able to do and practice to the best of your ability without worrying about how hectic your schedule is, and being able to provide like that, a little different type of care to your patients where you spend more time with them is truly something special. And I find that I see that in how my patients respond to me, and how they treat me and my staff and my office, how they feel about being at the dentist, right? So it's not all rare to hear from different patients like, this is a different experience. We actually feel more at home here than somewhere else, where we can sit down and talk to you. We can be open with you because you take the time. You really know who we are. You're not just in and out the door 15, 20 minutes, right? Let's just keep cranking it out. But I really do pride myself in that our office just provides like that next level of care that I think everybody, deserves. Dentistry, there's a great value to spending time with your patients, because the more you know about your patients, the more you understand them as a person, the better you could treat them. And as we know, it's not just the tooth. There's a whole human behind that tooth, and that plays a huge, huge role in how you treat everybody individually, right? And not everybody gets the same treatment plan. Not everybody has the same finances, preferences, aesthetic concerns, right? So I think that there's like an interesting thing within our profession where there's many different types of offices, right? There's the fast pace, the slow pace, the whatever it may be. But, and I have very little experience in working in a faster paced office, because this is pretty much, I came right out of school to this. But I find such high value in this style of practice, and then I find that the patients value it more. And then, not only, you're getting to know them, but when you spend time with them, you're also able to teach your patients, right? the value of dentistry, why we're doing certain things, what is the point, right? And education, as you know, is just as important for a patient's health as the work that we're giving them. Because if you're not doing the work at home, we know very well that, the dentistry will fail. Right? It's that's just the nature of the work. So I think that people really want the time of day. And I know that it's a little different depending on how your office is obviously structured, right? If you're insurance heavy or you're like a more faster paced office, right? You might not have the time to do that, which is fine. That I'm not saying that you can't be a great practice without it, but really I think dentistry, we have to slow it down. I think that something that I find is and this is in society as a whole today, we're very fast, right? Let's get it done quick. Let's get it shipped here a day or two, express shipping in a day. I want this done immediately. And I think we're rushing our way through all this, that we got to stop a little bit and say, hey, like there's a value in slowing down, and there's a value in taking a step back and taking your time. Not everything has to be rushed, but that's kind of how I've always approached my practice. And in the beginning too, I was like, oh man, well, do people even want to spend this much time with me in the office? Do they care, right? Or no, like, or is it too much? But then I look back and I find that there's such a great success with getting a patient to good health if you just spend the time with them. If you really just give them the time of day, you really teach them. And that's kind of my philosophy on practice, is that I want my practice to be a home for my patients, right? You can call me, text me whenever you want. If you have a question about teeth, if you have any problems or concerns, I don't want this barrier that, sometimes we might see between the patient and the doctor. You know, I've had patients tell me, like, because I'll answer, I have a work phone that all my patients get. It's a texting number, and they're free to text me anytime. I always have it around with me, whether I look at it or not is a different story, right? If I'm busy or whatever. But if I have time and I'm looking at it, I'm very responsive, or I try to be. And that's kind of like the policy that I've always had within my office, is like, talk to me, like we have to build this community. We have to build this rapport long term. I'm not just a person you walk in and see 6 months, you don't see again in 6 months, or you don't come back in 2 years, or whatever it is. I want to establish, it sounds cheesy, but a home, right? Where, any issues you have, you come to me, you talk. If you have questions, we talk. If you have issues, we talk. And I find that being open and available for your patients, which, not everybody has the capability to do, right? I don't have a family yet. And, I have a lot of time on my hands to really dedicate myself to this, but it's definitely made me appreciate the work that I do. And I find that the relationships that I'm establishing with my patients and showing them the value of my practice and the way I work has, really grown through this kind of mindset where, I don't want you to see me as like the scary dentist. And I'm only here to drill your teeth. I don't want you to see me like that. I want you to see me as somebody you could come to where, it's me and you, and we're fixing this together. It's not, I don't want you to be afraid. I don't want you to feel like there's a barrier, so to speak. And I find that in healthcare, in any profession, there is a barrier, right, between the professional and the patient. I mean, I find that I hear this too, is from my patients, how come you're so easy to get a hold of, but some offices, like if I refer them to a specialist or something, how come I can't talk directly to the doctor pretty easily, right? I have to wait for him to call me back, or maybe he'll get back to me. Whereas for me, like, you shoot me a text today or tonight, like, hey, can we talk? Like, I'll give you a call tomorrow, and we'll talk, or I'll answer the text right away, even, um, and things like that. So I have a very open policy, with my patients, and I really try to make it feel like it's not a challenge for them to come in. I don't want them to be afraid to talk to me, and I find that doing that and focusing on that for the patients just makes, the experience better. And it also makes my day-to-day better, where I have such a good rapport with everyone that we work through our problems. So, I go into work and I look at my schedule and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see Mr. So and so. Oh, I just remembered Mrs. So and so, her daughter just had a kid. Can't wait to catch up with her. Like hear about her granddaughter and her new addition to the family. So when I see my patients, it's almost like we're old friends, you know, and we keep up together, and it's quite a cool community that I feel like I'm trying to build. And the way my practice is really structured is it's mostly family, right? It's all like families. I see the grandparents, I'll see the parents, I'll see the kids, the grandkids, and most of the people in my practice, they know each other one way or another because that's kind of how uh previous doc always had it. Was she never really advertised. It was all like internal referral system that we took in new patients. We've built quite a great community within the practice, and it's been incredible.
Very cool. Now, Shay, where the last question about your craft is, where do you see yourself in 5-ish years with this practice? Like, are you going to go towards more biomimetic type dentistry, more sleep and airway, TMJ occlusion? Like, when you're a boutique practice, there's usually a couple of fields that you kind of delve into just besides the bread and butter. So, are you
Sure.
thinking that? Are you doing implants? Like, what are you thinking?
So for me, one of the things I learned pretty quickly coming out of school was not a big fan of surgery. Was never really, I thought I would be, and when I was in school, I was like, oh man, I love this stuff. It's interesting to me. Would love to do it. But I find that it wasn't for me, right? Like implant surgery, whatever it may be, wasn't something I was super interested in. But I did find that my passion really lies in TMJ, occlusion, and airway. And I think those three things, like you said, being a fee for service practice, is offering those treatment modalities into the practice for the patients is such a great service. And TMJ, sleep, and airway stuff is also just things that I've dealt with throughout my life myself. I've had TMJ pain for a few years now, maybe like 4 or 5 years. Wear a guard to sleep. I have issues with breathing and things like that. So it's always been just something I've been fascinated in. 5 years from now, definitely going to take a route into those because, like I said, being a solo practitioner, I want to offer everything that I can to my patients and to provide as much service as I can to them, so those are definitely subsets of dentistry that I think today aren't quite accessible, like a TMJ specialist or sleep, dentist it's growing, but it's not fully there yet. Like, and when I have airway conversations with my patients, I'd say 90% of them have no idea that there's
Mhm.
any connection. I mean, it's very foreign to them. When I bring it up, they're like, "Whoa, like that's so odd." And when I talk about your occlusion, your wear, I mean, GERD being, a factor with your airway and everything too, is they're like, "Wait, what?" Like, me telling somebody as a dentist, like, "Hey, go to your medical doctor. You might have acid reflux because I see this in your teeth. There might be something going on while you sleep." Like they're like, "Wait, how would you know that, right? How would you see that?" So it's such like a new concept, that and I think that there's going to be so much growth in that realm that I'm looking forward to seeing. And that's definitely the route I want to take with the practice. And then, of course, I'm big into tech. I love tech. I love computers. I'm a geek. So something I definitely want to get deep into is I love the digital workflow, doing digital work, 3D printing, and using that to improve my restorative and my aesthetics and things like that. That's kind of the route that I want to get to. Basically, like, when I think of interim goal for my practice, I mean, I don't plan on expanding actually. My practice is 2 chairs, very simple. And there's like another room in the back that I could like hook up, but for the time being, like I've always wanted to keep that, small home feel. And that's for now, that's kind of what I aim to keep. I don't want to open another practice. I've never had intentions to open another office or to take more space, to open more chairs. Like I'm very comfortable with, working between my 2 chairs myself and kind of doing my own thing. But then when you are a solo practitioner, like I've been hammering on, is you have to have so many more diverse, skill sets for your patients. Otherwise, you're sending them out to so many different people for, different procedures. It becomes quite hectic. So my goal for the office is I just want to be a super GP. I want to be able to take and handle most, not all the super crazy complex stuff, but to be able to handle the things that I should be able to handle and to provide that service to the patients. Surgery is not off the table, right? Who knows? My mind might change as I practice more. I might like it, right? But and I'm not closed minded to it. Like for now, it's just not nothing I'm interested in, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to revisit it in the future and or incorporate it into my practice. It's really, I'm just kind of going with it, seeing what the patients need. And, each year as I finish a year, I find too, I'm realizing, oh, okay, this is what the practice needs. I got to incorporate this into the practice, or we need to start getting things going to get this system going so we can provide this. So, that's pretty much my goal is I want to be able to pretty much tackle most of what comes in. I might not be able to do the crazy, right, fancy procedures, but just to be able to handle, most of what comes through the door, to be able to do my job to the best of my ability. That's really all I want. That's enough to satisfy me, in my career.
Fair enough. Now, I might ask you a little bit of an uncomfortable question here, just because some new grad out there might want to follow your path. And obviously, we both know how expensive NYU is, and buying a practice can be expensive. Are you able to safely and without too much stress manage your debt that you've taken on from school and practice?
So debt is killer. It's killer. I would say the debt load we take today is immense, and that's just something that hangs in my head every single day, no matter what. I mean, that's the big elephant, very, very, very big elephant in the room. And for a lot of us, especially today with the cost of going to dental school, it's $500,000, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge investment. And then for me to finish school, come straight out a year and a half later, not really build that much, right, yet, but to take out a big loan to buy a practice is is terrifying. Yeah, I would say, is it a lot to handle? Absolutely. Every day it's like on my mind. It's finances can be very tough when you're taking on a big debt load, and with the cost of running a practice now, it's not easy. It's honestly not easy. My advice would be, to anybody that wants to finish school right away and open up a practice is first and foremost, you have to think, how bad do you want it, right? Because there's going to be just so many ups and downs, and it's just such a hard path in the very beginning that you have to be ready for that. Don't think that you're going to jump in and this is what I did when I was taking over. Oh, I see the numbers from the previous doc, what she's doing production wise. I'm like, oh, it's looking great. Like, oh, I'm going to go in and be able to do the same exact thing. I don't think that's always necessarily true, right? Because you're different. Even though you've been like I was around the practice, it still took like a good year of me being there till the patient started to trust me fully. So they really got to know who I was, right? Without the previous doctor being around and supervising, you know what I'm saying, and being that force in the practice. So like from the very beginning, it's there's a lot of things that you have to kind of fight, and going into this much debt to do it, you really got to want to do it, and you really have to be willing to take hits, and the first year you're not going to go in and be making killer like, the previous doc is. And what we have to realize too is previous generations of dentists had it a little bit better than we did, right? They didn't pay as much to go to school. The cost of living was much lower. I mean, things were very different, back then. Whereas today, like you're coming out of school with 500,000 in debt, buy a practice, you're well over a mil, 1.5 mil. I mean, it depends on what kind of practice you're buying, but that's a lot to go into, you know, to take a risk, right? And it is a risk. And my first year, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go in, it's gonna be great, I'm gonna be making great money, I'm not gonna have to worry about anything. But then reality hits. There's a big cost of running an office. You have your staff, you have your overhead, you have your student loans, and then for where we are in our lives, trying to start our families, looking for our first home, marriage, right? There's so many things that we're financially responsible now for, plus the debt load. It's crazy. It's crazy. So like that first year, I mean, even just I had to invest more into the practice than after I purchased, of course, right? I had to fix things up. There was a bunch of things that had to be done. I mean, the first year, it's financially, it was tough, right? And that's kind of like the survival stage, right, of taking over a practice where, yeah, you take it over, the practice is humming, it's going well from the previous doc, but my previous doc, she slowed down, so I had to get her patients back in. I had to build up the roster again. I had to fix up a lot of equipment. The office was, she bought it in the 90s, right? So there were a lot of unexpected financial obligations that I had that first year that I didn't really think about or was worried about going into it. Where I was like, oh yeah, I see her numbers, I'm probably gonna make the same. But then you realize that she's 30, 40 years in. She's cranking out production like crazy, and I'm still learning the ropes, right? And that's where kind of like the idea of confidence comes in, is I was always comparing myself, right, to her. Like, oh man, I gotta be able to do what she does. I gotta be able to get this, to hit this mark, to get the same numbers she does, and that's how I'll succeed. And then I find that that wasn't true. I find that our journeys are individual. She practiced a different way than I did, and I see it more and more now as I'm going that and this is every dentist does their own thing. We have our own way of practicing. So, when I've discovered that and realized like, hey, I shouldn't be comparing myself to her. It's just gonna drive me crazy. Like this is my own journey. I'm kind of doing my own thing. My growth's not gonna be the same as hers, and I can't compare what she's doing after working 30 years, 40 years in the profession to someone who's, basically a baby. So once I came to that kind of realization, I'm like, you know what? That's like as long as I'm improving from where I am and I'm getting better every day, the practice is growing in its own way. It doesn't have to be the way she ran it, right? But it's kind of, you got to let it organically, kind of happen. Whereas when I first began, I was just trying to keep it the same, right? Keep it just like she had her practice so that the patients were comfortable and it wasn't anything new to them. And I conformed to the old style. But once I kind of broke free from that and I saw like, hey, like I gotta make this my own thing. I'm not her, I'm not her. That's kind of where I noticed the most growth, where, okay, now I'm getting new patients coming in. I'm getting old patients of hers coming back in. The office is humming. We're steadily increasing. And that's kind of where it clicked for me, was coming to realization, like I can't compare myself to her and I can't want to be like her because we're not the same person. Everybody's
Absolutely.
everybody does it their own way. So once I kind of broke free from that mentality, which was hard because I worked under her, all throughout before I took over. So everything I do, I was always kind of like a mini her, right? I always wanted to be like her, looked up to her when I was even her assistant, right? This goes back to when I was young, always wanted to be like her. But then when you realize like you have to step away, and kind of make your own path, that's where things really clicked for me. And I felt
Makes
like I
sense.
had full control of the practice, what I wanted to do, my happiness, and then all of that, ends up with growth, right? When you find your groove and you find your niche and, you find your subset of patients that come to you for you, that's where growth really starts to go, right? And then that's what I feel like maybe like midway through 2025 last year, towards the end now and going forward, I feel this strong momentum where now people know who I am, right? All the patients have gotten enough time to get to know me. I'm building a reputation. I'm my own person. It's patients aren't coming in asking anymore, oh, how's Dr. So and so? How's she doing? Right? Now it's how you doing, doc? Oh, I want to send you patients, so it's quite interesting the shift that I feel, and it kind of just like snuck up on me because for the longest time I was in my mind, I was like, I gotta do this like her so I can make money like her and practice like her, be able to give treatments like her and keep the office, because that's what the patients came for, right? That's what she built when she did it herself. Like that's what the patients come back for. And she did build, an amazing practice. And the way she ran it was phenomenal, but I couldn't do everything the exact same way. It just wasn't working for me, right? And when I kind of
Yeah.
figured out that mentality, things just organically worked. Like, like all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, like I'm looking at my schedule this month, it's packed. Like there's new patients coming in regularly, the production's doing good, and patients are happy. And so when you look at that, I'm like, yeah, it's every day's a learning process, right? It's an individual journey. as much as you have your inspirations and your mentors and who people you look up to and want to become, like you're going to eventually have to step away and kind of, build your own thing, which for a while that was tough for me just because I grew up with this practice, right? Like this was something that I held so highly, growing up and seeing and being a kid, like, oh, this is like my dentist, and then now that I'm running it, like it's cool to have the opportunity to take it now, and it really feels like I've molded it to something for myself.
Makes sense. Very good. Very good. So let's switch gears real quick now from practice ownership and the craft. Let's go towards the body aspect or the spiritual aspect. So Jay, like you do all of this stuff and you think about all this stuff and you reflect on a lot of things, especially practice and practice growth. How do you keep yourself mentally sane? How do you keep yourself physically fit? Do you do anything? Or is this something that now that your practice is stabilized, you want to aim towards getting to?
I would say, and I'll be fully transparent with it, is like the since taking over, definitely like pushed my health to the side, and that's something I'm always kind of thinking of and trying to be aware of is like that balance, right, between work and life and health. And for me, unfortunately, it's just been something that I've pushed away to the side. And I'm the type of person where, I prioritize certain things. And when I'm locked into it, I kind of push other things to the side, whether that's for good or for bad. Once I'm locked into one focus, that's kind of, it's all in for me, right? Like I'm going to put everything I can into that, whether it hurts me, or harms me, whatever it is, no matter what toll it takes on me, I'm still going to do it. So, and that's a lesson learned for me too, is like even like something simple, right? Like the first year I took over and even before I took over the practice, like when I was starting to work, I would skip lunch, right? See more patients, not eat at regular times, not eat breakfast, wait till like 6 o'clock when I get home at the end of the day, scarf down a big meal, and rinse, repeat. And I'm finding that that's one of my, poor traits, is that I sacrifice my health for the sake of my work, right? And that's like something that this year, especially, that I've been reflecting on is I gotta, physical fitness is priority for me because I've noticed, I mean, I used to, work out very regularly, take care of myself, but since dental school and then going right into, working and then taking over the practice, that's kind of something I just completely threw, to the side there. And I'm realizing that a lot of the stresses I had my first year, like mentally running the office, the anxiety, the constant, putting out fires, was taking a toll on me. And I had no way to deal with it, right? Where, in the past, I used to meditate regularly in the mornings, then go out to the gym, work out. Nowadays, it's, wake up, get dressed, get to work, start my day, and then, from the minute I walk into the office until I walk out, it's nonstop, right? So I'm skipping lunch. I'm not really taking care of myself. Some days my assistant she'll yell at me. She's like, "Doc, you're not drinking enough water." Like I see you're not drinking enough water. Like, you're working, but you're not stepping away for a little bit. So that's where, like, that's something I'm currently fighting with and working through. And I'm hoping that this year is where, now that things are stable and I feel like I'm able to breathe more, and I'm not waking up in the middle of the night stressing about something. Now I'm in a good position to really, focus now on my health, right? Where I'm getting past the growing pains of running the practice and opening the practice. I'm starting to get a good grasp on things, being more comfortable with the dentistry that I'm doing. The practice is working out well right now. I feel like I can get a stronger handle on my health. And that's definitely something that I wish I didn't wait until this point to, where I should have been working on it throughout, because that would have been a nice way to release stress and to take the tension off of a lot of things I was going through, right? Have an outlet. And at the time, there's really no outlet. And like that first like year or two is, I'm gonna be honest, pretty miserable. A lot of tough nights, right? Coming home and you're just like, oh my God, like everything's just going wrong. What else can possibly go wrong? Go to sleep, wake up the next morning, you're breathing heavy, you're like, all right, let's get back into work and let's fix this. So there's, yeah, there was a lot of that the first like the initial, the initial growing pains for me. And I feel like if I took care of my health more at the time, I would have been able to handle it better. And like some of those moments were tough, like they were, the mental battles can be challenging, especially, as you're gaining confidence as a new practice owner. It was a constant, right? Like fight of, I felt like mental fortitude, like, trying to maintain that was so challenging. And without a physical fitness and strong body, then your mind is not as strong. So that's where, I knew that I was sacrificing, and I knew every day that I was like ignoring my health to do this. Would I say it's worth it? No. I mean, looking back, if I could change that, I would, but it's just how I am as a person, how I've always been. It's tough, man. Like I'm locked into this. I don't want to focus on anything else. And I guess that's my toxic trait, where I focus too much on something and I let other things go. But at least I recognize it, right? I see
Yep.
that, and that's something that I'm actively trying to work on. Hopefully now that things are better and I feel like I have a better grasp on things, I'm not putting out fires all the time. I could focus on really fine tuning my health, because something I realized just last month, I got very sick, caught the crazy flu, right? I was probably out of work for 3 days, had to close the office 3 days. Worst shape I ever felt. Like I was super, super sick. Like I haven't felt this bad in a long time. And came to the realization, like, health is everything, right?
Hmm.
I turned 32 this year, right? And body doesn't get any younger, right? It starts to go down after 30. We all know that. And if I'm not healthy, I can't practice. My practice can't run, right? So if I'm sacrificing my health, I can only do it because I'm young. For now, yeah, I could skip the lunch. I could not work out, and I'll probably not face too many repercussions, right? What about 5 years from now? 10 years from now? Where am I going to be, right? And if I'm not in good shape, how can I continue to do what I love?
Yeah.
And then dentistry is physically demanding. People might not agree unless you've done it, right? Like if you're a dentist, you definitely understand that, it might look like we're just sitting there and, tapping your teeth with a little thing, or, drilling your tooth or whatever. But within dentistry, it's quite physically demanding. You're working with your back, shoulders all day, your hands. I mean, you're slouched over. It's an insane amount of stress to put on your body on a day-to-day basis, right? If you're seeing like, patients from 9 in the morning till 5, 6 o'clock at night, you're sitting bent over all day. That takes a toll on you. And like I find that, you have to treat your body well, you have to take care of it. And even though I'm, not the best one to be preaching about this, like I recognize that, like, some days I wake up and my neck is tight, right? And my shoulders are a little tighter. Things are sore from because the day before you had to do some kind of weird slouch over to get that angle to pull that tooth or whatever it is. Your body takes hits from it, and if I'm not taking care of it now, how's it going to look in 10 years? My old doc, she retired early because her neck was bent, like, S-shaped basically. She had scoliosis in her cervical spine, and that's from the work, and she said like some days by 5 o'clock, she's like, trying to lean her head around, and it's in so much pain she can't work. And she's like, she was like 56 when she retired. So, she didn't work with loops, right? She didn't really focus on ergonomics, and she had health problems from it. So that's kind of where like I recognize it, and that's something I definitely want to avoid. And yeah.
Hey man, like I'm gonna give you one challenge before we move on to the next segment. And there's something that like I came up with. Well, actually, I stole it from someone, but I've been preaching about it, and that's work-life harmony, right? We talk about work-life
Hmm.
balance, but I don't think that there is anything like balance. If you try to balance, you're gonna teeter-totter one way or the other, right? I think you got to find that work-life harmony, especially as you get married and have children, and you're running a business, you got to know that sometimes fitness is going to be your driving force, right? Or your practice is going to be your driving force, your family is your driving force, right? But if you don't know how to maintain harmony within those three, four important categories for you, you will end up losing everything that you put all your effort in for. And that is one of the scariest things I've ever heard in my life. And you don't want
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh yeah. And I could see, and I've seen people that make that, mistake, where they're in disharmony and their life falls apart. You can't Yeah, like you said, that's a great way to put it, is all the components have to be in harmony, right? It's not just balance, but they have to be harmonious and get along. I mean, that's it's hard when you have a family, a business, a profession, and many things to be responsible for. That totally resonated.
Yeah. So that's my challenge for you, Che. 2026, you're gonna try finding that harmony for yourself.
I
Because
like that.
as much as I want you to be a successful business owner, I want you to take care of yourself because you only live once in your 30s. And after that, the aches and the pains only get exponentially worse.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that is what I'm gonna give you, or I hope to give you. Now, moving on to the last part of the podcast. You're originally from Thailand, correct? So, kind of quickly, if you can, like summarize where you're from. Like, what was that journey like? How did you end up here? Or how did your parents end up here? And did you face any challenges?
Sure. So I was actually born in California, Los Angeles. So my parents, my family's from Thailand. I'm Thai, and my father was in California at UCLA for business school at the time. So he was there with my mom, and that's where they had me. So I was born here in the States. And then by the time I was like 2 years old, parents moved us back to Thailand, and that's where they had my brother, my younger brother. And then we pretty much stayed up there until I was like maybe 6 years old, and then my parents moved over back into the States. So pretty much this was maybe like 1999 was when my dad probably first came over. His uncle was a restaurant owner in like Jersey, New York area. Got him a working visa. My dad dropped everything pretty much at home to come here, and he came first. So he was the first one in the States. I was still back in Thailand with my brother and my mom. And, just kind of like a little brief history is with Thailand, when you compare work opportunity, right? My dad was in business there. My mom like owned a small business in Thailand, but the opportunities here were just much greater. Even for them to come here and work in a restaurant as like a waiter or a busboy or whatever it may be, provided a better living for the family than what we were doing in Thailand. And that's just, the nature of the currency, and things like that. So that was kind of like the catalyst to my family coming here was to, see like most families that come over here is to seek better opportunities, right? The American dream. So my dad came first, then my mom and I came over like a year after. So we had like a little bit of separation in the family, when we were working through the visas and trying to get here and immigrate here. And then once I came over, then it was like maybe another year or two until my brother came over here. So we were pretty, fragmented like for a couple years as a family, which actually one of the strongest memories I have still to this day is like seeing my mom, like after calling him, like my younger brother, while we were here in the States and he was in Thailand, she would cry after because she missed him. And then that really kind of gave me like that, being like, I was like, what, 6, 7 years old, seeing mom cry. And I'm like, man, like, this is tough. My brother's not here, right? I didn't get it at the time, but looking back, like that's just such a strong memory that sticks out is like having you be separated from your family is very tough. Trying to get everybody here and situate the family was challenging. When we came over, both my parents worked in a Thai restaurant for my uncle. We had no car, right? I was walking like maybe 2 miles to school every morning, 2 miles back. We lived in like this, tiny little boarding home, like a tiny little room for the three of us until before my brother got there. My dad always got the bed, right? Because he worked the most, and my mom and I would sleep on the floor. Shared home, that kind of thing. We had pretty much nothing, and my parents worked their way up. And something I'll always say, and I'll say it with 100% uh, love and respect is for my parents. They are the hardest working people that I've ever known or met or will ever see. Like my really started from bussing tables, working their way up to now. My parents are restaurant owners, so it was quite an interesting journey to see where my dad began just waiting tables, and then he got the promotion right to become a manager at a newer location, and then the opportunities start to build. Next thing you know, my parents were like, well, let's do this, let's open our own thing. And their hard work and effort was really what got me to where I am today, right? Without the family business, without all of that hard work, I wouldn't be, doing this, right? Like I wouldn't be here. I mean, I don't know where I'd be, but if it wasn't for what they did, like I don't think I'd have all the opportunities I have today. So I
Yeah.
always am truly, grateful of what my parents accomplished in a very tough time, where getting our first car, getting their green cards, right? Converting from the work visa to the green card, where for me it wasn't a problem because I was born here, but for my parents, I remember there was one time where my parents had to go back and I stayed here by myself with my grandma because their visa expired. So, there were many instances in my childhood where I just remember the struggle of like trying to immigrate your family here and start a new life. But then I also highly, highly value that America gave us opportunities we couldn't get anywhere else. And my parents were able to really build something out of nothing, right? And that in itself is just something that I've always held dear, dear to my heart. Like long nights and tough days, like I've seen my parents go through it all, and to this day, they're still, working away and doing their thing. So I have such a deep and profound respect for what they've built. I find that we don't appreciate the people that pioneer our lives for us here, where, we're lucky, right? That we have these opportunities because our parents work so hard to to get you here.
Yep. Absolutely, man. I totally understand that sentiment. Like being from a immigrant family too.
Yeah,
And everything that's going on in current society is kind of it kind of breaks your heart in a way because America gave us or our parents the opportunity to become who we are, and just everything in current news is just kind of it's
yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
unfortunate.
Especially that we've been through that, right?
Yeah.
Like there's, like I said, it was like 2, 3 weeks where my parents got sent back to Thailand, and I'm like, it's just me and grandma. Like, are my parents coming back? Like,
Yeah.
are they gonna come back? Are they gonna be good? Or what am I gonna do? Am I gonna have to move back? Like, what's going on? So there's so much uncertainty, and I really, that's such a strong motivator for me today with what I do is, I'm the first doctor in my family, right? I was the first one in my family to become a doctor, and I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for what my parents did. So
Hmm.
every day, my main motivator is just thinking like, man, my parents worked so hard to get us here. So I want to take this to the next level so that the next generation, is even better off, right? And that's the goal is, now that we've broken through and gotten here and started something, now it's up to me to keep that going, right? And then take it to the next level for the next generation, my kids, my grandparents, my grandkids, right? So that's the goal is when you see like, your family working so hard to do it, you can't help but to not want to continue to, push the same way, right?
Absolutely. So I got my final two questions for you, Chay. When you die, because we all die, what do you want on your gravestone and why?
What do I want on my gravestone? For me, I would say keep it simple. Just my name, right? When I was born
Mm-hmm.
and then when I died. I think that, life and death is just part of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been the kind of person where I don't want people to worry about me. I don't want you to think
Mm-hmm.
much. I just pass by, right? And I'm a very easygoing guy, very lighthearted. I wouldn't want, I just want to keep it simple, right? Just keep it simple. Don't want people to think much of it. Yeah, like I don't want to have people get held back by anything. So, for me, I don't want people to make a big deal out of like my life or my death. I think that it's just part of it. It's just part of the cycle. Like that's just how life goes, and people come and people go, and that's just how it goes.
Fair. Fair enough. So my second question is, who is Shay in one word?
What does it say that again?
Who's Shay in one word?
That's a good one. In one word,
Mm-hmm.
I would say satisfied.
I like that. Why?
And the reason I say that is that I'm big into finding happiness internally
Mm-hmm.
without materials or vices. And, to me, being happy in life is probably the most important thing. Your own self satisfaction and happiness. And when I live my life on a day to day basis, I try to do whatever I can to make myself happy and satisfied. And I could really say, like, on a day to day, I am happy with where I am. I'm satisfied with what I've accomplished. I'm satisfied with life, and I look back and I don't regret anything. And I'm not always craving the next big thing, right? I'm not always looking for that next satisfaction, that next thing to make me happy because, like, to be honest with you, I truly am internally happy. Right, so if I could say like what I carry myself through with day to day is I'm just satisfied, and I try to do things within my life that give me that satisfaction, whether it's through my practice, through my personal things, whatever it is, that when I lay in bed at night I could say like, that I'm satisfied and I'm happy. That's all we could ever ask for. I find that especially in today's day, we look for happiness in many different things, especially with the age of like social media. We want those quick hits, like,
Mhm.
spontaneous shopping, or, uh, doing a quick purchase of this or that to make yourself happy for a short amount of time. But I don't think that that's the solution to long-term happiness. You got to find it internally and find your own satisfactions. And you have to also just be okay with your life the way things are. I find that humans can't help but to crave more, always want more, greed and always aiming for the next thing, but and which is great, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't have goals, you shouldn't reach, you shouldn't push yourself to the next step, but it's also important to find your own satisfaction and to be okay with what you have and what you have going on currently in your life. I think that we take things for granted and we don't appreciate enough things in our lives. And then especially with social media, you're always comparing yourself to what other people are doing or what you're seeing out there, and you're always making comparisons. But really, what's the most important is finding your own satisfaction within yourself, within your internal self.
Very good. Actually, I have a book for you to read that you might appreciate. It's called Solve for Happy by Mo Gaudat.
Okay,
I think you'll appreciate it.
does it touch on? I'm assuming the same kind of philosophy and
Yeah,
ideas, right?
but his perspective is from once being one of the most powerful people running Google's AI program, like its original foundations, to kind of losing his family in the way, but then finding happiness in all of that.
I see. Yeah. See, I think I would like that. I find that the most important thing in life is really your internal. No matter how bad you have it, everybody's got their own battles, man. Everybody in life's got their demons, their battles, things they're dealing with. It's just a matter of if we let them win or not. That finding yourself and that internal happiness is important. I think it's the foundation for a successful life, because if you're not happy with yourself, you can't be happy with other people. You can't be happy with other things, right? You can't be happy with life. And for me too, and I try to carry this mentality when I manage my staff, for example, and how I treat my staff or my patients, is that I don't let things get to me. I don't let little things bother me. I don't snap at my assistant. I don't take little things and make them a big problem. But I think a lot of it is like letting it go. I try to see the good. I really try to see like the positives no matter what, which not always easy, right? But I think that having that mentality is looking for the best, like, is really important, and I think it carries into your life with how you treat people, how you interact with people on a daily basis, right? If you're happy with yourself, then you treat other people with the same respect. I try not to get bothered, by things that shouldn't bother you. And everybody's different, right? Some people get bothered by the smallest things, but like something I always make a point of with myself is like, don't let it get to you, man. Why are you gonna let it ruin your day? Like take it easy, be easy on yourself. It is what it is. Sometimes it's a tough one, but let it go. Don't make a deal out of it. Don't introduce stresses into your life that you're doing to yourself, right? Like that's on you if you get upset, right? On you if you come in grumpy going to work and you're hashing out on your assistant and then you're whatever, right? And you're being a grumpy doc. It trickles down. So it's like for me, I try to see the best in things. I try to be satisfied and happy with what I have and appreciate what I have in front of me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, my final ask of you is, do you have any final parting words or advice for the audience?
Closing remarks, I would say keep going at it. I think that especially this year was a big year of reflection for me to see my own growth. And what surprises me is what we're all capable of that you don't think you are. Like you'd be surprised at what you yourself could do if you really push yourself past your comfort. Try to do, try to do your own thing, and then also stay strong to who you are. Like I think that that's something that I carry with me in my practice every day. Is I stay true to who I am. I don't try to get tempted, by things, right? Remain honest to the patients and, establish that trust and rapport. Really treat people how you'd want to be treated. And I think that by being your genuine self and being honest with people, like that takes you a far way, that takes you so far.
Absolutely. Fair. Hey, well, Shay, thank you so much for spending the time on the podcast. Your wisdom on business and just, it's always been a very lovely conversation whenever I talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Always enjoy our chats. We always have great conversations.
Absolutely. Well, and to everyone else in the audience, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Mind, Body, and Roots. Until next time, be well.